Welcome to Straight from the Source with Hayley Watts, and today we have Scott Thomson, Oroville City Council member, also pastor, right?
Yeah, yes. Life Church in Oroville.
Okay, we met when I was
10 years ago.
9, maybe. Gosh, it's been a long time.
It has.
And that's, I mean, you had just moved to Oroville pretty recently from Idaho at that time.
No, I've been in California since the 90s.
Oh, okay.
So I was in the Bay Area before moving to
right.
Oroville.
So you've had a taste of everything.
Yeah.
Idaho versus the Bay Area versus, do you
versus
kind of
Russia.
feel like, versus Russia?
Yeah.
Tell me about that.
Lived there for a couple of years.
Okay.
So I speak some Russian.
Okay.
Yeah.
What was that experience like? What brought you there?
Just doing some volunteer work with the church.
Okay.
So we helped, I mean, there was a bunch of stuff. I worked with 3 different cities in the far east of Russia and a city called Vladivostok.
Okay.
So there's a lot of drug addiction there. And so we worked with the church that was doing a drug rehabilitation program. And they're still going and doing great. Got 3 different churches there in Nahotka, Ussurisk, and Vladivostok. So went there, didn't even speak Russian.
Right.
And then learned it myself while I was there.
That's crazy.
Yeah, it was crazy because you even go to the store to buy like a tomato. You don't just pick a tomato up and go and scan it at the scanner at that time.
Yeah.
You had to ask somebody behind the counter for a tomato. So you're like pointing and grunting at what you need behind the counter. And so you quickly, for survival, had to learn how to say tomato.
And you didn't have Google Translate on your BlackBerry or your flip phone back then, right?
No,
yeah.
not back in the early 2000s. Yeah.
Yeah, wow. So tell me about the Russian people.
They're amazing. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I mean, even with all the stuff that's going on in Russia, you know, I still have friends in Siberia, St. Petersburg, Vladivostok, so from the full spectrum of Russia. And so being able to, because, you know, news that we get here, even the beginning of the war versus, you know, news that my friends were getting over there. So being able to bounce across, like, what are you guys hearing about this?
That's what I'm so curious about. Yeah, what are the things that we're reporting versus they're reporting? Like, how do they view this war?
Well, it's funny we're going here already, but so immediately the stuff that's coming out now, I got a lot of the backstory on Donbass and that region of Russia and the war that's been going on there for quite a few years that we didn't hear about. It was just immediately, you know, this is happening in Ukraine, and this is what Russia's doing. And then a lot of my friends were able to give me some of the background of what was happening between the 2 countries, which really Americans as a whole, as citizens, we came into this like halfway through the party. I mean, not even then, just like way beyond. There's a lot of history that as Americans we're just kind of not aware of.
Right,
so, not saying that, you know, I mean, immediately it wasn't, I thought, you know, oh, Russia is, you know, valid in their concerns.
Yeah.
But immediately for me, it was, honestly, on my standpoint, it was Russia's got some evil in it, Ukraine's got some issues in it, and America's got some issues in it.
Yeah.
And so I didn't see really in the whole thing any really clean entities. I saw the victims there in Ukraine, really, when it comes down to it.
Yeah, there's always more to the story.
There's
more
always
to the
story,
story.
and the people of Ukraine really are the victims, and so it's just a real tragedy. We have friends in the area there right below Ukraine who actually, from the get-go, were bringing in supplies and hearing just the traumatic stories of people that were crossing the border to flee what was going on. So
yeah, interesting. Wow.
Yeah.
So back to you and your different life experiences that led you here. One thing I felt, because I had sort of the experience of I lived in LA. I grew up in LA. Then I lived in West Virginia, very rural.
Sure.
And then I came here, and I feel like Butte County is this happy medium middle ground, like we were just talking about. There's no traffic. It's so nice. People are kind to each other.
Right.
They recognize each other in the grocery store.
Right.
Small town sort of feel.
Sure.
However, at the same time, it's, you know, we have great sidewalks and we have infrastructure that feels a little bit more advanced than what I experienced in West Virginia. I mean, what is your take on 10 years in Oroville?
Absolutely. Actually, my hometown is Boise, Idaho. So graduated Meridian High. And
it's not so rural then. Boise's right. I mean, it's pretty.
Now it's huge, right? But it didn't feel huge back, you know, when I was growing up.
Yeah.
And Boise, you know, a lot of people are fleeing. I even just heard yesterday somebody say, you know, Idaho is the most beautiful, you know, land that they've ever been to, and it is beautiful. I mean, it's gorgeous. But being there, and it's still gorgeous. I don't like the traffic.
Yeah.
It kind of begins to feel more commercial. But as far as the land, the geography, and what the area has to offer, we have the exact same thing. In Oroville, we have that small town feel. We got a lot of history. I mean, the beginning of California and before that. And you have this river that runs through it, just like Boise. Boise has the Green Belt. They call it the Green Belt, which is a bike path that goes for, I don't know how many miles, it's 20 miles or so. And at the beginning of it, they have the lake, and they have what's called Lucky Peak, which is a swimming area. So we have Loafer Creek, which is in the upper area. But we have the lake just like Boise does. We have the river. Half an hour out of Boise, you can be in the mountains.
Yeah. So
half an hour out of Chico or Oroville, you can be in the snow in the mountains.
Yeah.
And then you can, from this area, if you want to go to the big town, I mean, you can drive an hour and 20 minutes and be in Sacramento. A couple hours, you're at the beach.
Yeah.
Oroville and Chico really are a hidden gem that has had a bad reputation for a long time.
Right.
And people who do move and have moved to Oroville, they came in with this understanding of Oroville being such a not a good place to be.
I feel like it's so funny. I've been saying that because I live in Chico.
Yeah.
But every time I go to Oroville, I think, oh my, this historic, beautiful downtown, and it's right there on the river.
Yeah.
And it kind of blows my mind because I grew up water skiing and wakeboarding, and
Yeah, me too.
I feel like people don't utilize the lake as much as they could. Some people do, but I mean, maybe it's people are more into fishing up here more so than like the water sports.
Sure.
But still, it must just be maybe having the jail right there or something that why does Oroville have a bad rap?
Well, for a long time, it had a lot of problem with meth.
Okay.
And I don't know the exact date, but at one point, I believe Oroville was ranked either number one or one of the highest as far as, meth.
Yeah.
And, there was a lot of, bad decisions that were made from its city leaders and whatnot that, opportunities that were presented and weren't taken advantage of. So there was just one thing after another. And then you had the, the dam being built was amazing for Oroville during that time. You had a lot of workers, a lot of infrastructure, a lot of money. Then after that job was done, you had a lot of, things that were developed to handle taking care of the manpower that came for the dam.
Yeah.
And then all that manpower left when the job was done. And then you had all these businesses that died. And that caused, a lot of kind of the city kind of to die for a long time. And so it's just one thing after the next that was just kind of there that, kind of, and then stigma and, things that people have. But Oroville's, I mean, if my house were in the Treasure Valley, Boise area, I would have it for sure over $1 million home.
Right.
And I didn't pay that for sure. I mean, so now, I have views of oak trees, and I did not pay. I paid Oroville prices for a piece of just heaven. It's beautiful.
You are a lot closer to the Sacramento airport than Chico is. That extra 25 minutes makes such a big difference. It's that 90-minute drive. That's my only gripe with Chico is that 90-minute drive to the airport.
Yeah.
Which, hey, if that's my biggest complaint, what do they call that, a champagne problem or something?
Well, living in the Bay Area, 90-minute drive is
traffic.
Is just normal.
2 miles.
Yeah, because when I lived in the Bay Area, living in northern Marin and then doing work down in southern Marin or in San Francisco, an hour drive was just a couple exits.
Right. Yeah, a lot to be said about our area. Do you feel like, so you were here, of course, through what we branded it at our news station, the Oroville Dam spillway crisis.
Right.
Turned out, thank goodness, to be a big nightmare and a big scare.
Right.
Not quite a crisis. No one was hurt, and that was great. No big damage to people's homes, at least. Do you feel like since then that the city has more of a seat at the table with the DWR? Like, does the city get to have a voice in management?
Well, the James Gallagher, Jim Nielsen, and Doug LaMaffa, they set up a committee that kind of did some oversight with that. But
the advisory committee?
Yeah.
Okay.
But as far as the city and regarding that, not too much more.
Should they? Do you think?
It is, for our safety. But I feel that our representatives, honestly, James Gallagher, Jim Nielsen, Doug LaMaffa, and whoever's going to be the next assembly person, they really do an amazing job, and their communication and working together with the city council, relationship with the members, myself.
Yeah.
I feel that that there is that for sure. communication and representation.
Yeah.
But having, our city itself, having the city council to be like in charge.
Mm-hmm. You have enough on your plate.
Yeah.
Have you heard about that orphan levy? That was something that came up at a recent advisory meeting. I never had heard about this before. Margot Rowe, one of our reporters.
On that committee, yeah.
Okay, yeah. So keep an ear out for that.
Okay.
There's some levee that runs along the Feather River apparently, and it's just in disrepair, and who knows? There's always something.
I know the Oroville levees are in good condition, although there is a study that's going to be done to make sure and check and to see if there's infrastructure that needs to be handled, but there hasn't been any problem with ours specifically.
Okay. So you've been on the Oroville City Council. Basically, when you first came, you came essentially to be a pastor, right? And then did you already have an idea in your head that like maybe local government?
Not at all.
Oh, okay.
Zero.
Yeah.
In fact, I didn't even want to go to city council.
Yeah.
Right? I didn't want to be involved. I met with Linda Dahlmeyer, who you know. She was the mayor at the time.
Right.
And didn't know her from Adam.
Yeah.
But just end up wanting to, I'm new to town, wanted to be involved with the community, wanted to be involved with the city, and wanted to just kind of, as a pastor, want to bless the mayor and be like, hey, as a pastor, I want to be supportive of what you're doing with the city, what's going on. And so we were supposed to only meet for like half an hour, end up having a 2-hour lunch.
Yeah.
And, got way more information than I was expecting, and her and I just connected. She's just a great lady.
Oh, yeah.
Great care for the city, and from that conversation, it was hey, why don't you come down and check out a city council meeting and see for yourself what's happening. And so that was the beginning of the end.
Yeah.
So when I went and saw, and there was just, not to point any fingers, there was just things that I saw on the council that really just were discouraging.
Yeah.
And for me, it quickly became apparent that there needed to be a shift. And I'm not the only one who thought that. Obviously there was a large sentiment with the community. There needed to be a shift from the city council. So my first thought wasn't, I'm going to go run for city council. My first thought was because I'm new to town and I've got a new church. And so I've got a lot on my plate.
Right.
And so I went to 4 different business people in town and got a packet from City Hall, 4 different packets, handed out to each one of them. And as a pastor, I said, will you commit to praying about, the well-established businessmen, successful, well-rooted in the community, have a good solid head on their shoulders, understood commerce, understood what it means to, because sometimes I feel that politicians, they're so disconnected from what it actually takes to survive as a business or an entity in town. And, as you know, businesses, and small businesses especially, the taxes and revenue that comes, it pays for your roads, it pays for your infrastructure, for your staffing. So you really need to have a solid business base, which I understand on a basic level.
Right. So
just going out to them of, hey, you understand how to run something, you not just taking a check, but you know what it means to write a check.
Right.
So I went to them and got them each to commit to praying about running with the packet of how to run. And on top of that, we held a meeting with Linda Dahlmeyer. She talked about how to run for, we just advertised at the city. Hey, come learn what it takes to run for city council.
Yeah.
So I'm like looking, headhunting for people to get on city council. And we had a meeting. I didn't really see nobody came forward. There was a good showing, but there wasn't anybody that came forward from that. And then I went back to all 4 of those people who gave those packets to. And it's funny, the day, a little breadcrumb for me, the day that I handed out those 4 packets, I was at one of our new church members, just shooting the breeze on his front deck. And he was talking about his own life, and he said, sometimes he didn't know nothing about what I was doing with the 4 packets. He said, sometimes, God puts things on our hearts, and our reaction is finding somebody else to do it. And when he said, when he said that, I literally just went, ugh. I made just kind of a ugh. And he's like, what would I say? And I'm like, I don't even want to have to come out of my mouth what that would mean for me. And he's like, no, tell me. I'm like, I don't even want to speak it.
Oh my gosh.
And he's like, well, tell me. And I was like, I don't know, maybe I'm supposed to run for a city council. And he goes, ugh. And I'm like, right?
How much of your time does this take on a weekly basis? Depends on the week. It depends on the item.
Yeah, especially when we're hiring staff. Because we've had to do a lot of staff hiring lately, which has been amazing. I could brag on our staff right now as at Oroville, our city staff, and quite honestly, our city council. Our staff, Brian Ring, we stole from the county. And
I remember that. Yeah, I called him for one thing, and he said, oh, I'm actually in a different role now.
Brian is a rock star.
Yeah.
And, on top of him, our finance, our public works, all of the different departments that we have at the city now, I really don't think that the citizens of Oroville will see the benefits. We got a new chief of police, right now, interim, we're hoping that'll be longer, but I don't think the citizens of Oroville will really see the benefits or the fruits of the decisions that have been made in the last few years for probably another 5 years, because it takes a while. Measure U monies came in, the citizens passed that, and then based on that, because we were at a skeletal crew.
Right.
I mean, everything was. Our police force, they couldn't solve anything. They were just going from extinguish issue to extinguish issue.
There have been some issues with that police force. Things have come up.
Goes without saying. I'll just say I agree.
You can't talk about the lawsuits, I take it, right?
I just say I agree. There's been a lot of issues. But the shift that's happened on a radical recent base, again, I think the citizens start to see that shift.
Yeah.
But they're going to see, culturally, when you have a city and you have issues, long-term issues, and then you bring this, you see a shift happening culturally within the community, or economic shift, or a city staff shift. You don't see those results immediately. Even when you have monies come in for roads or plans for roads, those roads don't get fixed right away. And we didn't have, our own city engineer or public works department was kind of stripped bare, and so now having, we put more pavement down in the last year than combined previous years.
Yeah.
I mean, there's just been a lot of work, and still we got a lot of issues. I mean, I drive a truck that doesn't have smooth, doesn't ride smooth over bumps. I can feel them all. So I drive the streets of Oroville, and I feel every bump and pothole there is.
Right.
But so there's a lot of work to do, but the work that has been done already is huge, and with the staff that we have in place, and you're only going to see a continued, just really blossoming of a beautiful town.
So I have a question about years ago, I can't remember the year, some grand jury report came out, and it was talking a lot about certain people having too much power, right? And I believe Bill Agrone was a big part of that, possibly. And my thought at first was well, when you only have I look at my station, right? And we have only a couple dozen people running the news department. We all have 3 jobs. And it's out of necessity, not out of, I want to be so powerful because I'm the anchor and the news director and the weather fill. It's no one else can do the job.
And
was that kind of the issue there?
Yeah, and Bill Agrone, he got a lot of flack during that time with the grand jury report, which is sad because, did he have to fill a couple hats? No. He was the chief of police at the time, and we needed somebody for this area, and so he knew what it meant to be administrative over staff and run departments, and so we had Tom Lando, who came on as well. So Tom was really helping out a ton. I'm not sure if you know Tom and his wife.
There are 2 Tom Landos. One is a Chico School Board trustee, and the other was with the Feather River Recreation and
Tom was he was administrator here in Chico for a while.
Yeah, I know them both, and I get them mixed up, but both great guys.
Yes, Tom is he came, and he also just kind of helped Bill walk through as far as what it means to be a city administrator. And Bill, he filled a couple roles there, and it wasn't people can presume motive. Yeah. But I think you get in a slippery slope if you begin to say, I know the reason why you're doing something. I mean, only God knows really why somebody's doing something. But ultimately, the city had no money. Yeah. And then, we did, anyway. So now that's different. We're in a different day now. We do have a chief of police and a city administrator, and they don't share the same. It's not the same person.
Right. And, can you tell me why not keep Bill as chief of police, though?
So Bill was there for, 10 years?
Time.
Yeah, for a long time. And it just was time for a change. Yeah. So you keep, Bill brought in a lot of great ideas and brought in a lot of things that we're still using today. So for any entity, there's a certain time where you say, hey, we've, used this or gone this path for a while. I think it's time to try something different. Yeah. And so now having currently Jason Wines, who came from the DA with, his reputation precedes him. And already, just even the short amount of time that he's been there, things like, for example, our municipal law enforcement we haven't been full staff. Now we're there are people that know Jason or Chief Wines and know his reputation and know how he functions. Now we have a line of people wanting to transfer over to work for the City of Oroville.
Great.
So staffing, where we've been struggling before, we're seeing a shift where we're actually getting not only, like our MLEs right now are full, 15, and it hasn't been that way. And now we're even transferring some out to be dispatch. One's going to dispatch and one going to records, I believe. And so, just the momentum is definitely shifting. And now we're going to have, some of the vision that Chief Wines has is actually getting foot patrol back into Oroville. I mean, things that have been not there for a long time.
Yeah.
The citizens, again, they don't see, unless they're involved in city council or come to city council often, they don't see these decisions are being made. But they will see the benefits. I mean, not immediately, but they will see the benefits. I'm looking forward to the day you'd be driving down in Oroville and all of a sudden you see cops. You're like, doing double take. Are those cops walking the sidewalks?
Isn't it so funny, like that shift from when you're a kid, or a teenager, the last thing you want to see is an officer on the road. Oh, was I speeding? Whatever.
Yeah.
And the older you get there, you're just like, whoa, that's a sign of, that's great.
Yeah.
That's public safety.
Yeah.
You feel cared for.
Yeah.
It's interesting how that changes.
Absolutely.
And it's so important.
Yeah, I got pulled over driving my dad's car, and I didn't realize he had his lights on off of the auto. And onto off.
Yeah.
And so we just left my house and I got pulled over. And he didn't know who I was, which is fine.
Yeah.
I'm thinking, this is great. I'm getting pulled over in Oroville.
Yeah.
And he's like, I just very polite, officer, your lights were off. And immediately I'm like, oh, I'm sorry. My dad's like, oh, it's my fault. He was in the back seat, put him to auto and license and registration, just went through the whole thing. I'm like, thank you so much for doing your job. So it's even that is a shift from them not having time. I mean, there was the people will complain so often for years prior. You call, the police and they say, "I'm sorry, we can't do anything about it."
Go online, file a report, and they're not trying to be dismissive.
They're just being honest.
You can only do what you can do.
Yeah, that day is over, and even Chief Wines says you cannot say say that anymore.
Right.
And so there's just a huge shift that's happening, and again, I think the citizens will feel it, maybe not immediately, but they are going to feel it.
So Oroville is currently a constitutional republic.
We are.
Right? What does that mean to you? What brought that up? It sounds very, fancy, intense, revolutionary,
Yeah, it's not.
Yeah, okay.
It's funny because America is a constitutional republic.
Oh, okay. History lesson here. So break it down for me.
So the constitutional republic pretty much means, a government of the people, by the people. It means limited government.
Where you live by a constitution?
Right, a limited government. The government derives its power from the people. Right, and so during the pandemic, we had this shift, emergency powers that were shifted to our governor, and we all saw the abuse. That there was mandates that were put out, and then him not following his own mandates. Even.
Haircut, because he got a haircut.
No, that's the French Laundry.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah, his eating out there and eating inside.
Laugh about it now.
No masks.
Yeah.
Yeah. We'd laugh about it now, but there was just mandates that were put out, for thee, not for me.
Right.
And so as a community, as a city, it's like, we just saw this long-term, it just felt like an abuse of power. And it also, part of, I feel, in the North State is, our state of California kind of prides itself on being a voice for the minorities. But here in the North State, we are a minority. We are a minor voice amongst the
just
state
being
of
rural communities.
Yeah, we are like, Sacramento really kind of, I feel, and I think a lot of people in the North State feel that our voice is not heard. And they govern the whole state based on these large cities. And so the way that a large city, Sacramento, San Francisco, LA, the way that those cities operate, is different than a rural community.
Yeah, okay.
And so they were, a lot of, and this goes from all the decisions I feel like in Sacramento are really made with the larger cities in mind. And so in these northern, areas, our voice, our opinion, really is just kind of whatever, kind of sit at the little table over there and
the kids'
let the adults talk,
Yeah.
And so with that lack of sense of our voice being heard, that's where the declaration kind of came from. And Gavin started the ball on that one. When he was the mayor of San Francisco, he declared, San Francisco a sanctuary city in defiance of federal law. So just, dealing with all these things, seeing the hypocrisy, dealing with these mandates and more mandates and regarding, COVID and whatnot. And not that anybody was denying COVID existed, and whatnot, but all these mandates that were coming, and knowing that, again, he was being hypocritical, and then knowing how he defied laws, is like, we're just going to re-declare ourselves what we already are. It's kind of a reminder of, this isn't a one-person just autocracy where you just kind of get to decide everything. You're not a dictator.
Right. So
we just declared.
Okay.
And so which is more the declaration of just saying, hey, we are still a government of the people, not people, by the people, and you don't just get to just do whatever you want. And so with that said, we're just basically, if you want to enforce your mandates, then you're going to have to bring your law enforcement to enforce those mandates. So we, our law officers, they showed up to, somebody complain. We had people complaining.
This was going to be my question. Yeah. How did that work locally?
Well, we had people calling and saying, my neighbor's on his front porch. Literally. And so, and you have businesses, that were operating responsibly. I mean, people still have their freedom of will, right? And get to make decisions for themselves. And I mean, hindsight is 2020 now, because they were saying, oh, the vaccine, it stops transmission, and masks do this and that. And I'm not sure your thoughts on all that, but there's studies that show after the fact that maybe some of the things that they said weren't exactly true, and they knew they weren't true. But whatever, that's a different conversation. Yeah. But we had businesses that wanted to operate. Had some people that knew each other. I mean, Oroville's an older community, and I don't say older as far as the demographic. It's a community that's been around for a long time. And the citizens that live in Oroville have been around each other for a long time. So these aren't just like, a big city, people come in, you don't know who they are. A lot of like the hair salons, these people went to school together, their kids play baseball together, they know each other. And so you have, people that's like, hey, listen, I need my haircut. Yeah. Or I'm hungry and I'm tired of eating ramen. And so you have businesses that wanted to offer service, people that wanted the service. And at that point, there's being responsible. You don't want to be foolish,
right?
But then also putting a little bit of at least trust in the people to operate within themselves in a manner that is respectful and responsible.
Okay. Well, my last question on this, just we're running out of time here.
Sure.
I just want.
So fast.
I'm really curious about how that worked out with the county, because that was something that we were seeing too. It's like, well, the city might say this thing, but Butte County Public Health says, we're going to lose our state money if we don't enforce this or whatever. Was there pushback from the county level, or was it just pretty seamless? Well,
being the fact that we were being respectful, like, hey, listen, we don't want to be foolish.
Yeah.
It's not we're saying, hey, everybody, let's get in this big, get a party and everybody kiss each other, right. But being with at least personally, I didn't find a bunch of kickback from the local or the county public health. Yeah. They wanted for sure people to be educated. That was a big thing. So if our cops did show up, which they did, if somebody called and said, hey, this is going on, the cops didn't not respond. They did respond. And then they reminded the business owners, hey, this is the law, this is the mandates, this is the requirement. I want to make sure that you're doing this or that. So they did inform people, but nobody was being arrested or, shutting down of businesses or whatnot.
So I wanted to ask you about your faith and being a pastor.
Sure.
And then, in speaking of how our government works in terms of like the separation of church and state, does that ever come up for you? I mean, if you're guided by your faith, but at the same time, don't believe in ruling by it, right?
Yeah.
So how does that all work out?
So it's interesting because a lot of people don't understand that whole letter, because that whole letter of separation of church and state.
It's like Federalist Papers or something?
The premise of that was that it was a letter to the Baptists saying that the government is not going to dictate to the church to have a national church. That was the premise of this wall for the churches from the government to stop the government from dictating to the churches of we're going to declare the Baptist Church as our national church, like in Russia. You have the Russian Orthodoxy, and actually in Russia you have there is actually a persecution of the Russian Orthodox Church towards, although they have other denominations, there is this oppression a little bit that comes from.
A lot of countries have a national religion.
Yeah. So there was that letter of, hey, listen, we're going to have a freedom of religion. There's going to be a separation of church and state. And also, not having necessarily the churches come in and saying, forcing religion upon all of its people. There's the freedom of religion, and whether you're Christian, Buddhist, Hindu, that America would be a country that is, a freedom, freedom of religion.
Yeah.
So that said, a lot of people really pervert that saying of separation of church and state, of basically saying Christians, really gets perverted, saying Christians are not allowed to bring their faith into politics, which is, if you look back at our founding fathers, that is such a huge perversion of what the founding fathers meant. And actually, as a community that desires to have the voices from all different types of people, to say your voice matters, your voice, your culture, you want everybody at the table, but then they say, except you Christians, separation of church and state. Don't bring your faith into... Has
that been like your personal experience?
You definitely get it from people in the community,
yeah.
Who say, oh, you're not supposed to bring, no praying or no saying Jesus, or, it's because it's funny even that you can say a lot of different religions are accepted even in mainstream, kind of media, except Christianity. Muslim or Hindu, those kinds are celebrated. Oh, it's culture. It's one more culture. It's like, except, keep Jesus out of this thing. And so again, for as a Christian, the main thing is being at the table. It's not saying everybody needs to be Christian,
right,
but it's saying I get to come to the table. I as an American, I get to come to the table,
yeah.
And that doesn't mean that I leave part of me, at home.
Yeah.
All of me as a whole individual gets to come to the table, because I don't tell somebody with their different cultural bias, wherever they come from, hey, you can come to the table, but don't bring your cultural bias to the table. But yet it's told that to Christians, saying, oh, it's separation of church. Don't bring your cultural bias to the table. I love what Doug LaMalfa says, either you're at the table or you're on the menu. And for a long time, I know this for sure, and in a long time, Christians haven't felt, and people maybe argue with this, but Christians haven't felt welcome at the table. And I know there's a lot of people who say, we don't want to get involved with politics. That's dirty. We want to stay back here. But by and large, you look at where the state of California is, and I think a direct result of the direction that California has gone has been a direct result of people of faith, people, Christians, but all people of faith who have held themselves back of getting involved and saying, well, we want to just do our church thing and let those people do their thing. But the reality is, all of our voices need to be at the table. And I have relationships with people who have very diverse views from myself, even within my own family. And I love having those conversations with people, especially if they can share what they believe and why they believe it.
Yeah.
If somebody's saying, I've already made up my mind, don't confuse me with the facts, that's a difficult conversation to be had. But if a person is, on the polar opposite, of me politically, I'm intrigued.
Yeah. Oh, me too. I love to hear.
Tell me why it is that you.
Yeah.
Tell me it is why you believe what you believe, and I love having those conversations, especially if we can be mutually respectful, because I think that's missing in our culture.
So have you ever had that kind of conversation with somebody, but then you actually walked away with a wider perspective and a slightly altered view?
Oh, 100%. And I've walked away from those conversations with having a deeper love for that person.
Yeah.
Because people, it's said, I didn't make this saying up, but it's said that people don't necessarily want to have their way done, but they at least want to have their way heard.
Right.
And so being at the table, and that's what America used to be beautiful about. People coming to the table with different viewpoints and us having those conversations of like, why do you think? But now there's such a hostile environment where if you think a certain way, then immediately I get to blast you as a label, and then once I label you, oh, you're just a lefty, and then immediately I can put hate on you, or you're just a right-wing nut job.
It's like a team mentality. It's like 49ers versus whatever.
And immediately, I no longer have to deal with you as Hayley, a person with dreams and visions and a heart and values. I can just treat you as something that is not human, and therefore I can put hate on you that doesn't involve a human. But when we lose that humanity, that level of honoring each other, regardless of whatever somebody believes, but at least respecting a person's view and saying, at least hear my viewpoint, and then being open, like, tell me why you think that, and then having that discourse. For me, I love it, and I think that that's what's missing in our culture in America, and I hope that we can find our way back to that table.
Well, it's not over yet, and I like the optimism moving forward too, because I think I hear that from a lot of people, so you're not alone, and I'm with you on that. My last question on a much more serious note, does being a man of faith keep you from believing in ghosts or make you more likely to?
Ghosts?
Yes.
Well, as a Christian, you believe in spirits.
Spirits, okay.
Yeah.
So but is it immediately to heaven or hell, or could it be someone still stuck in this plane with us?
That's funny. So we definitely, as Christians, believe in ghosts.
Okay.
But we call it, spirits.
Right.
And so going beyond that, what those spirits are, whether they're angelic, demonic, or, we, as a Christian, biblically speaking, Christians don't believe that when a person dies, they roam around the earth.
Yeah.
As a Christian,
could be lonely.
Yeah,
I wouldn't want to.
Yeah, no. As a Christian, it says that once you die, then the judgment, and so you're either one place, upward. And we're going to Easter. Either you're going Christian, you're either going down or you're going up.
Right.
And there's only one way up, and it's through Jesus, and it's not through merit, not through being a good person, having a good smile, how much you go to church, how much you don't go to church. Obviously, it's good to go. As a pastor, I need to say that because it's true. We all need to be fed and have that community of support group and whatnot, and hear the truth and be taught. And isolation, you can get in a lot of error. But yeah, there's only one way up, and it isn't through, getting your name on a membership roll. Only one membership roll matters.
Okay, Scott, thank you so much.
Yeah.
Great talking to you and getting to know you a bit better.
Yeah.
And if you liked this episode, or maybe you didn't, leave us a review.
That's okay.
On Spotify and Apple Podcasts.
Yeah.